provide this presentation. People email me about stuff all the time. I've already mentioned my Guardian Ad Litem work, so I will spare you the spiel on that. But I will mention speakingmentors.com soon. You guys are looking for people to speak. So if you're scared of these guys, you know, who knows, you might not be comfortable with people in your local area being your mentor. There's a whole bunch of people signed up to be mentors across the globe to help people learn how to come into public speaking that are willing to help you out, including myself. I happen to be the webmaster on the site, and sign people up, but you can find other people there that might help you, that might fit you in your category of what you're looking to speak under. So other than that, I do want to pitch that I am speaking at Data Kile on Friday on my mental health talk, if anybody's interested in that and hasn't seen it yet. I've been giving that one a lot. It'll be like my 7th time this month. So that's a good talk according to everybody else. So we will move on to what little slide decks I do have, because this is mostly demos. You will like that part with pauses in the middle while it runs, because it runs for like 2 minutes to update things, but there's only like 4 pauses, hopefully, I think. So for installing it, the first thing I want to mention is Pester5 breaks all the dbachecks. So by default, it used to install Pester5 when you downloaded dbachecks. But if you already got Pester5 on your machine, you're going to have to make sure you install Pester4 and force it to come down. So I've included that command as part of the scripts you can download off my website and as part of the slide deck. So it's out in front, because a lot of people install it and then can't get it to work and don't know why it works. And then they go to the SQL community chat and try to figure it out. And so you guys will know up front. If you do that first, you don't have to worry about anything. And then you just install the module dbachecks in your PowerShell window, and it pulls down dbatools with it and PS framework, and you're all set and up and running, ready to go, except you don't know what to do yet. But before we get into that, let's figure out what dbatools and dbachecks is. dbatools is an open source PowerShell module that was started by Chrissy Lemire over in Europe somewhere. It was developed by the SQL community contributing to it. I think they have over 500 commands and at least 100 people that have contributed to different commands or fixed bugs and things like that over the course of, I don't know how many years it's been out there yet. So they're looking to make it to do anything that you can do through a script or SSMS, you can do through PowerShell, because sometimes the syntax of omitted to T-SQL is hard to remember. But if you can go PowerShell and do one command and do dash and it auto fills up the parameters for you, it's a lot easier to remember the syntax to a backup command, in my opinion. So if you were to do a git command, which is just a regular PowerShell command, and do it against the module dbatools and format it so you can actually get a wider screen and it doesn't just zip along, you would get a very long list of commands. This is what I could fit on the screen, but you can go to dbatools.io/commands and get the whole list of commands. But as you can see on here, we've got a bunch of things that will add different things to the database. We've got things that we can back up, things that will copy things between servers and things like that. They even have one that'll actually migrate a whole server from one server to another server. It'll migrate everything over, databases and all. So it's kind of pretty cool. So we won't be discussing all the really cool stuff, but some of the cool stuff. So dbachecks is another open source PowerShell module. It was created by Rob Sewell over in Europe as well, coincidental. Rob and Chrissy ended up teaming up on dbatools at one point, and a lot of people in the SQL community have contributed it. Not as many, because it doesn't have as much stuff in it as dbatools does. But what it does is just checks your SQL Server configuration, and what we're going to be using it for is just check our default configuration when we go in and set it up against what the defaults are set up in dbachecks. You can write your own custom tests that can run against dbachecks by putting them in a folder and stuff. And there's a blog post on how to do that on the GitHub page. So if there's things that it doesn't test for that you want to test for, you can actually do those. And if it's a test you think other people might like, you can, contribute it. I've contributed a whole bunch of CIS tests for security compliance. I owe somebody a blog post at some point on how to actually run that. I started it. I wrote the code for the blog post. It's just one step close to writing the blog post. But basically, it'll provide you output to a Power BI report, my favorite way to look at it, because then it's a GUI and managers like GUIs. Or you can put it into a table for historical purposes. And it provides it to a JSON file, which is actually where the Power BI report actually reads it from. So you've got multiple sources that you can go into. I know if I was implementing it at the part of the side of the company that won't let me use it, we'd be exporting into JSON and importing it into Custo for our results, because that's how we do most of our data there. So, and it uses dbatools functions to retrieve values that's being tested. So if it wants to test that a SQL agent job has an owner of, SA, then it will use a command that checks the agent job and checks for the owner, and just use that command that's in dbatools. There are a few commands that are computer related, like clustering and things like that. So those will fall outside of dbatools. But for the most part, all these are database tests or database engine tests. And I mentioned the framework it uses earlier. So it uses Pester as a framework for testing, because it's built to test things and say things have passed and failed and turn things red and green and all that stuff when it spits out output. So it's kind of nice that way. Again, if we did a get command on this particular module, you'll see you have very few commands. This is actually all of them. So it's all encapsulated in these few commands. We will be mostly using the invoke dbcheck and checking out a few other commands like the get dbcheck, so you can see all the different checks it has, and actually doing a set so that you can set variables for what it actually tests against and things like that. But we won't be going through a whole lot of these commands because there's not enough time in the presentation to do all that. There's only an hour, not like 3 or 4. So when we do a get dbcheck, you can see this is a list of all our different checks that it runs. Like, for example, the first one is database mail enabled. It's a CIS security check, and the silly CIS security people think that database mail should be disabled. Go figure. Yeah, so much fun. But all those are agent tests. You can actually run, when you run the invoke command, you could actually run it against this unique tag or any of those all tags that are grouped together. So like you could run all the security ones together, all the agent ones together, or all the ones that are tagged CIS, and that's how you would get a CIS one. But it requires some configuration extra to get the CIS ones actually running. So this is the basic command for running a check against the whole system and just running every single test there is without any exceptions. And then you tell it to start the PowerBI up so that you can actually see the results, and then you hit refresh in PowerBI so you can see what you get. So when I first started doing this presentation, this is what I would get. I'd get 126 failures. It has since changed from that to I think 121 today. I just updated dbatools and dbachecks right before we started. I even installed patches on my Windows server and everything. So we're raring to go to see what I broke, right? Everybody's cheering for that, right? Now we're going to go to demos because that's all I got left. So hopefully I didn't break too much, but we're at 121, like I said. So first thing we're going to do is actually we're going to go clear out these agent alerts and anything related to agent alerts, because that's a big number and will take us down to less failures. And most of those are just because we don't have any agent alerts. And part of it is because we don't have a database mail set up and things like that. So if you were to click on one of these, it would narrow it down at the bottom and tell you, look, I don't have error message 823, 824, 825, severity 16, so forth and so forth. I don't have anybody to mail these alerts to and things like that. So we will go into that area and try to fix all of those first, because that'll give us our biggest bang for the buck to start out with. But before we start fixing stuff, I want to do a little bit more PowerShell with you, just in case you haven't messed around with dbatools and stuff. I did put the commands in here for you just in case you needed them. And then I've got the update commands in here that I always run right before the presentation to see what breaks from where they fix things. But if you ever needed to take and get a list of dbatools commands, you can always use the find dba command that lists all the commands they have available. I like outputting it to a grid, because then I can use the criteria at the top to run it. It's my terminal running. Need PowerShell. Come on, give me PowerShell. Something. There we go. That wasn't nice. Just never done that before. Just runs. But it's going to pop us up a little GUIfied interface here where we could use our criteria up at the top and filter things out by, like, we could look for availability and get everything that has a description of availability group in it. As long as everybody spells availability right, because I have a tendency to mistype it. But we can do things like that and try to narrow things down and find things like registered servers for the CMS and things like that, so that you can find everything that has to do with that and get together anything that has backup in it. Of course, they do backups differently in a couple of different places, looks like already. So, you know, might just look for back. Or you can look based on the command. So that just gives you the ability to kind of scroll through and see what all they have. They have a bunch. As I said, over 500 at one point. It might be more than that at this point. But they do have tags inside the command. So one of the tags happens to be agent. So you can run that and get the ones that are just for SQL agent. And that's still quite a bit of stuff there. I know one of the new ones is create agent operator, because I wrote it for this presentation after I found out they didn't have one. I've got a few more commands to write so that all of this can be dbatools and not SMO stuff as well. So I got notes for that throughout here. Then we were looking at our dbachecks before, and it wouldn't fit on the screen. So that's going back into dbachecks to see what all it will check for. And it's got a lot of checks. So let's see what all it will spit out, so you can get a general idea of how much it's actually checking for. Even though you've seen that 300 and some passed and 121 failed. Come on, there we go. But we get this big list. It even has, you know, long descriptions and stuff. But all of these are the things they'll be testing for. And then if you bring this up, if you look at the tags or the unique tag, these are all things that when you do that invoke command, you could run it against that tag and just get that particular piece back. So if it's a unique tag, you would only get that particular one back. But if you go into the other one, you could get security back and get multiples back, or things against the operator and get multiples of that back. You get things that are marked as high back, like having suspect pages. Those are bad to have, and things like that. So, or things that are related only to the database, you could run it as database, only to the agent as agent. So now just a little bit about getting help with commands, because you know there's a lot of commands to look at, and you're going to be like, how do I do more than just your examples? Or you might want to dig into some of my examples and see more code and customize what I've got here. So the get help command is just part of PowerShell, and then as you write your PowerShell module, you basically write the help into it. So if you look at the basic get help for like spconfigure, which does your spconfigure commands, like, you know, remote access and having your MDAC turned on and max memory and things like that, it'll spit out the command, what a synopsis of it is, and the general syntax for it, and the overall description, and then tell you, hey, these are other ways you can get help. So if that's not enough, I usually look at the examples, because what's better than looking at examples? And dbatools is pretty good about giving you 3, 4, 5 examples of everything, unless they don't have a lot of examples to give, but they do have, this will list every single config option. This will do it for 2 different servers, so you can pipe in multiple servers to almost every command they got. You can do more than one server. The demos I'm doing are just against one server, because I don't have the money to spin up like 50 million servers in Azure, so or run them on my machine. So, and this will return it for this instance. It'll only return the max memory. So you can run this against all your servers and check that your max memory is set to what you want it to be. And this is how we're checking it behind the scenes against a formula to make sure it's based on your total memory is set to what it should be, probably against Jonathan Cahias's recommendations. So, and that's the best way to get examples on how to run things and look through how things work in dbatools. So, and I left the other ones up here just so if you want to run them, you can. Now onto some good stuff. So we're going to set our instance hosts and go ahead and clear out the bottom of the screen. So we're just working on dbatools 2, because yes, I blew up dbatools 1 box when I was creating it. So hey, I was going to create a 1 and a 2, and then I blew up 1. I was like, oh, it's not worth keeping up with 2 machines. So first thing we're going to do is set some variables for our database mail. So we're just doing all basic stuff, database mail at mail.com, because I don't want anything coming to me by accident. And then our database operator is going to be DBA. And then we're going to configure some properties to actually equal these values so that they're always set that way. And anytime it runs a test, it will actually test against these values that we set. And then we'll look at all those values that you actually can set. So it sets those for us. And then there's a whole slew of things you can actually set in here to test against, because you may want to customize some of this. So for example, you may want more error message IDs in there. I know one I like to test for is 829 as well, because that's another one that indicates corruption. There's one in here for trace flags, and sometimes you have custom trace flags. At DocuSign, we have special ones that are written just for us. So you may add those in there to make sure that they're always on your systems and things like that. So you've got the ability to go in and customize a bunch of these. You've got things you can tell it, you know, I don't want these particular databases checked for things. I want to exclude this and include that and things like that. So these are all things that you can go in and customize by running the git command, and then it'll start checking against those too. Versus the defaults that are set up in there. So I'm going to use dbatools as command just to get me a server instance, because I do have a slight bit of SMO that I do have to run, but I'm going to run it against an instance that I pull out on dbatools so that it's less work, less SMO I got to write to get there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually enable our database mail, because, you know, we need to use it, even if it's against security policies. So as we can see here, it changed the value from 0 to 1. And then we're going to go ahead and create us a mail account. So as we can see here, it created us a mail account for us. It's not a busy account. So then we're going to actually create a mail profile, and this is a part of SMO that we got to do, that we need to get into a dbatools function at one point, is actually setting the agent profile to use this mail profile by default. So this is where I got a little bit of SMO in there to make sure that that happens. So the agent knows, hey, this is my mail profile that I need to use. Then we're actually going to go out and create a new operator based on our parameters we had defined before, like our email. And we're just going to tell it to page all the time, because that's what you normally do with a database mail operator. Yes?
That.
Sorry.
Someone had joined.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I thought maybe someone had a question. But we're going to create our database mail operator. So now we got a nice database operator going to here, and we haven't been emailed yet. Yay. Then we're going to set it as our fail-safe operator. Again, we're going to use a command from dbatools to get the agent server, and then use the SMO from there to actually set it to the agent operator. So, you know, combine the tools a little bit. So that needs to actually be rewritten into here. I thought I had it working in here, but for some reason it doesn't work in there. So now we get down to the part where we're going to actually set up our alerts, because that's, you know, what we wanted to do to begin with. So in PowerShell, if you put 2 dots, it'll just do everything in between those 2 numbers. And we're just going to look through and name them severity 16 alert. We're going to create a new SMO object for it, because believe it or not, they do not have a new DBA agent alert. They have a get and a copy and a remove, but not a new. So that's something that I need to put a ticket in for, or write myself, one of the two. So I don't have to use SMO. And then we're going to do these 4 error messages as well. Like I said, I like to have 829, so it's in my demos for that. And we're just going to name it error and the number. And it's the exact same code, except it's going through a different loopy. Okay, so those have ran. So I'm going to let ISE actually update my JSON file. And I want to check at this point, because this usually takes about 1.5 to 2 minutes to run, to see if anybody has any questions about what I covered so far, or any questions in general at this point.
And a reminder, you will be on mute. So if you do have a question, unmute yourself, please.
Quick question. It looked like you were in PowerShell 5.1. Do you also work with 7 as well? 7X?
Yes, it does work with 7.
Okay, cool. Where do you
I-
where do you find that you usually work?
Well, my servers at work are all 5 still. They haven't upgraded to 7.
Okay.
So I'm stuck on 5 at the moment. So I personally have 7 on my machines that I usually play with.
Yeah. Okay.
That are
cool.
in my lab machines. But I find most people are still using 5. So I left this at 5 because of that. Now, if I find that changes, I'll update this to 7 because this is my machine. I can do what I want with it. But dbatools is making sure everything stays compatible. I think back to PowerShell 5 at least, and making things compatible with PowerShell 7 because they want everything to run on Linux and go cross-platform. I mean, that's one reason it's all in lowercase. dbatools and dbachecks are named in all lowercase because Chrissy learned Linux first, and she likes the Linux command line and stuff, so she named it lowercase because in Linux everything's lowercase because it's case sensitive.
Yep.
So I thought that was a fun trivia fact when she said that on a podcast one time. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's why there's no capital letters in there.
Thank you.
No problem. And if you happen to find anything that you run on 7 that doesn't work, you can always put in a ticket for them, and they're pretty quick on responsive on trying to fix anything that's not compatible. So we went from 121 down to 80. See why I said we get our biggest bang for our buck? We fixed a whole bunch of stuff really quickly. So that was like 41 items and we're done. And that's just setting up alerts and stuff. So our next thing we're going to tackle, because it's taking up a big chunk on our screen, is all the hologram scripts. So it by default, dbachecks and a lot of DBAs in the world like all the hologram scripts. If you don't happen to like them, there is a way to turn them off so that you don't have to use them and you don't have to clear out the alerts. That's completely up to you. And if you like something else like minionware or your own custom stuff, you can actually write your own checks into a repo and have it run against that and make sure those are installed instead. So, but most people are these days seem to be using all the hologram scripts, and I'm converting somebody else over to them soon and getting away from database maintenance plans. Maintenance plans. So on how to do all this stuff. So we're going to clear out the host and set some variables again because I like variables. Now, one cool thing about installing it is it will pull it straight from GitHub and install it on all your instances that you specify. You just give it a backup location, a cleanup time. I tell it to log to the table. I do like having that command log in the master database that says, hey, this is everything I've ever ran. You tell it to go ahead and install the jobs, tell it to install everything. You can't tell it just to like install the backup procedures and not install everything else. And I do replace, I put the replace existing on here because you guys at some point, these things are changing because now they're on GitHub. You may want to replace the scripts. So if you ever want to update the scripts, just take out the installed jobs so it doesn't affect the jobs. And then you get a new updated script, and then you can figure out if you need to change any parameters in your jobs that you want to use any of the, fancy parameters, so to speak. So this will actually just take it and install it right off of GitHub. As you can see, it's downloading, and it by default puts it in master, and you can actually put it in a different database if you want to. Then what I've done is I've wrote schedules for each one of the jobs, and some of them are in arrays so that like the fulls are running at the same time, because system databases are usually small. So at least on my system they are, because my system has nothing on it. It doesn't even have user databases yet. So it was just installed, not really installed, but that's what you think it was. But we're going to run those Sunday at midnight. And what I tried to do is just put the different frequencies of jobs in here, because this command is a little tricky on how you got to do frequency interval. You need to look up the recurrence factor to know what that is. The start times are all these, nothing that looks familiar things. So I did a few different ways of doing the jobs. So I've got the diffs running Monday through Friday at midnight. And because of the way that this is written, I had to write a separate one for Saturday. And then I got the logs doing every 15 minutes, so you can see how to do a daily backup, and then you change the frequency interval to every day, and then you gotta give it a subtype of minutes and a sub interval of 15 minutes. So see, it gets a little, yeah. I wanted you to have enough examples to do like weeklies and things like that. So, and then we got, our integrity set for a weekly, our index optimized, and then all the weird jobs set for midnight every day, or extra jobs, not weird jobs. So we'll go ahead and schedule all those jobs, because that's one of the things it's going to complain about now that the jobs are there, is that, hey, they don't have no schedules. We're not running. Okay, so it's done that. So now the next thing it's going to say is, wait a minute, I don't have an operator on here to complain to if I fail. So we're going to look at every job on the system, and if it doesn't have an operator, we're going to change the operator by looking at the set DBA agent job and setting an email operator on failure for that job name. There's probably, you might even be able to pipe this into this command, but I never did try to do it where it was just one line. But there's probably a way to do that in just one line of code. I never did check to see if job could be piped. And then another thing that it actually complains about is your recovery mode on MSDB should be full. So we're going to set that to full mode, because we want to get our log backups and stuff for MSDB. And then we're going to run our full backups on our system, because it's going to complain now that we've got everything. It's already complaining we don't have backups, and we don't have integrity checks ran on anything. So we're going to kick off those 4 jobs as well. And then we'll wait about 10 seconds before we update our report. So this will get another big chunk of those extra things set up. And this is something that you can just rinse and repeat and run on the system and run it repeatedly, and it won't hurt anything. I put enough if statements around stuff where if you ran it a second time, it would just do what it's already done. So I think that's enough time to fix the backups. If it's not, we'll just let it drop off on the next run. So any questions about all the scripts or anything else you can think of at this point?
Yeah, hi Tracy, this is Rajiv. I have a quick question. Let's say a scenario where, let's say I'm at a particular location. I launched this shell, using the dbatools. I have a particular state of affairs in terms of some process running. I was monitoring or whatever, and I had to leave. Let's say I had to rush home or whatever. I want to pass on the baton to somebody else. Is there a way I can pass this whole, maybe shell state, lock, stock, and barrel to somebody else?
Don't think so, but I don't really know for sure. I think once you got the shell open, that's a process that's inside your user,
Right.
your user that you're running. It's under your user processes. So I don't see how you would be able to pass it to someone else, because it's an open process running under your user account.
So there is no way to pass on the baton in some trick, whether OS trick or something. They're like, not off the top, right? Okay, that's
Not
fine.
off the top of my head that I know, no.
Okay,
Because like I said, it runs as PowerShell, like underneath. If you go to Task Manager and look, it's going to have a PowerShell thing that's right under your account. So there's no way to like assign that to someone else.
Okay,
So,
all right, no problem. Thank you.
we should be approaching it finishing. It's been running consistently today at around 1.5 minutes. Sometimes it runs up to 2 minutes.
Hey, so you've obviously been working with these tools for a while, but
Yep.
Some advice for somebody new just getting started. When they look at this, it could be a little intimidating. Any advice that you have for somebody new, either wants to learn it, maybe they've been a DBA for a while, but haven't used this, that type of thing?
Yeah, for DBA tools, there's actually a get starting page. If I can find it real quick. Let's just get started. Sorry for my obnoxious keyboard. Get started page. So bring that over here. And it goes through how to install it, approaches in learning it. They've also got the Manning book that they've wrote out on Meet. They're meeting. They haven't finished the book yet, so they've got the online version where they're doing early access to it, and they're writing a whole bunch of stuff on how to use different portions of DBA tools. I highly recommend that book because Rob and Chrissy both are working on that. But they're going through here and giving you examples of how to do different things, of just different things you can do and different commands you can run. There's lots of blog posts of people doing different things. So if there's a command you don't know how to use or you want to use because it's your first time, so of course you don't know how to use it, you can always Google and see what see if someone else has wrote a blog post about, because sometimes the people who write the commands will actually write up a longer blog post on how to use them. Again, check the help for examples and descriptions of everything. And from there, and also in the help, if you get the full help, it'll show you the author of the command. So you might be able to reach out to that person directly. The SQL community Slack also has a channel for DBA tools. So there's constantly people in there answering questions on stuff. So you can always go in there and get some help as well. So if there's something in particular you have questions about, but it pretty much goes through getting you started here, and then it's got stuff on getting you started with more complex things down at the bottom. So they've got a lot of different blog posts on their own website to help you out with these things. So
Tracy, I have another question. Sorry.
Here. Oh, sorry.
So go ahead, finish your thought, please.
I'm sorry. The Learn DBA Tools in a Month book of lunches is linked right here, and it's a fantastic book. It's got to be one of Manning's bestsellers ever, probably. But these are so far the chapters that they've finished. So you've got the basic beginnings and setting up a lab and getting introduced to it and getting started. So this is this would be my next go-to for getting good and involved into DBA tools. And then from there, you'd have to learn dbachecks separately because it's a separate thing. So there's a beginning guide on GitHub for that as well. So, all right, I'm done preaching.
So I had a second question. So if I want to migrate, a database from, let's say, on-premise to cloud, like Azure or something, does this tool offer some commandlets or something?
They do have, I know one that will migrate from server to server. I'd have to check to see if it would migrate to the cloud or not, because they do have like a start migration one.
Oh, okay. Like, okay, how about something like I take a backup, but the backup should go to some URL. Is that doable?
Yes, that's doable.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, their backup commands have a lot of stuff in it, and I was going to look for their migration command real quick and remember what all it does. I don't remember if it's just instance to instance or if it does anything with Azure or not. I think this might be just instance to instance.
Oh, so that's the granularity, it has to be instance level. I cannot do anything at the database level.
Well, no, this is a migration thing that will actually migrate from one server to another server. So I was trying to see if it had any Azure, like something where you could tell it just do the Azure related stuff. But I don't see anything Azure related in here. But there is an Azure credential, so maybe it does do something Azure related.
You might just look at a copy DBA database too to get started, and I think the migration has that as one of the pieces of functionality.
Yeah, it does. Copy database. Should be over here on the right somewhere. I should be able to find it.
A little lower. You're so close. Whoa, past.
Ah.
Very
There
warm.
it goes. But this will actually migrate it just goes from one server to another server too, because you have to use DAC packs to migrate things up to Azure because you can't use backups.
Okay.
So I don't know if they have anything that will convert into a DAC pack and move it for you or not, or if they have something that would, migrate it as scripts,
Mhm.
because you can't just use a restore.
Right, maybe carry over the backup to a virtual machine and then over there convert into, Azure SQL compatible or something.
That's on it. Yeah, that one, it does it on a managed instance, but that's basically like having a regular SQL server, so, but not an Azure SQL DB. We can do some backpack functions in here to clone SQL Server databases. They have that here. I mean, they do have backpack commands in here. That would definitely help you out in migrating stuff.
So if I have a back file, it will convert that?
Mhm.
Okay.
It has the commands here for even creating one, and they have it going through Jenkins to do stuff and everything, so.
Okay, so the DevOps option is there. Okay.
And then like this guy wrote it, so you can ping him on Twitter and ask him questions.
Thank you.
They're very open about questions. That'll probably be his handle in the SQL community too. So if you ever get to a command you don't know, the SQL community Slack is a great place to go for these questions, because it was started by Chrissy too. It started a lot around dbatools, and it's got a lot of other channels, but the dbatools channel is heavily used in there for people to get help. So, and then a lot of people sometimes will go to a separate chat with you and help you out with what you're trying to do in particular and things. I've used it, so sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. I have to figure it out too. All right, I went ahead and refreshed this from where we did all the scripts, and we're down to 25 failures. So see, we're getting there from 121. So now we just got a bunch of little stuff like ad hoc workload optimizations, the DAC, backup compression. We want our auto gross not to be at 1 meg and 10% and things like that. So we're going to run through those. And I'm also going to tell you just some other things that I like that dbatools does in general, even though there's like 100 things I could probably tell you about, but the presentation is only supposed to be an hour, so. So I had to pick and choose some things. Wrong place. So our miscellaneous file, we're going to do the same thing, clear a host, set our instance name. We're going to turn on optimize for ad hoc workloads. It's something that's recommended to be turned on. It's existed since 2008. I've never heard of anybody really having a problem with it being on their system. We're going to turn on our DAC, so if something really bad happens, we at least have a backdoor way in. Don't tell the security compliance people. Actually do, so you can get an exception, but hey, they want it turned off. Silly security compliance people. We want our backup compression turned on. I've ran this on every system that has backup compression. Of course, if your system has very high CPU, you may not want to do this. So caveat there. And you can actually turn it off so it doesn't actually check for this and show up in your report if you need to. And then we're going to turn off remote access, because that's another thing that's recommended to be turned off. So then it actually recommends having SP as active installed. I assume everybody's heard of that. If not, Adam Mechanic wrote this great thing that's better than SP Who 2. It tells us what's going on in our system. And he has like a whoisactive.com website that has his 30-day blog post that goes through all kinds of scenarios on using it. And it recommends you have that installed. It does not recommend Brent Ozar's script, but I love SP Blitz Index to death. And some of his other scripts are good too, but I love the Blitz Index one the most. So I usually go ahead and install that too. And I do know that they just added a command to install Eric Darling's scripts, because he's been writing some pretty cool stuff as well. I don't know if it's been published yet, but I've seen the chatter on it. So that I will probably add in here at some point as something just to make you aware of some more troubleshooting stuff that people would have available to them. If you're familiar with the SQL IO Watch or the SQL Watch.io project, that's the free system that another European, right? I don't know why all these PowerShell stuff comes from the European side, but I guess they're more creative than us or something. I don't know. But they started another thing that will actually monitor your system, and it produces reports, puts it all in a database. I think he's got Grafana hooked up now and PowerBI and all that stuff. I don't know anything about its performance because my free open source thing is completely different. I'm writing a book on its database engine right now, so I can't speak for its performance or even how it works because I've never installed it. But you can actually install it just from inside of dbatools because it's related to that project. So you can run all of Glen Allen Berry scripts from in here, and I'm actually going to do that later. So we can set our query store option because we have MSDB. That's one of the databases query store can be set on. And little known fact is that you can't set it via the GUI inside of SSMS. So sometimes you don't know that you can set it in MSDB because of that, because you can't view any reports on it either, by the way, because there's no GUI for it. It's like ghosted. But we're going to turn it on so that, it can do stuff. We can still run queries and see if it did anything. I still need to file a bug for this, but maybe they fixed it. I can't rename my SA account for stuff. No, it's not fixed yet. Yeah.
So, Tracy, I have another question.
Sure.
So let's say, there is there's a customer, they have hundreds of SQL installation instances and all that. And I want to go discover their environment. Does this give any option?
If you want to go out and find there's 50 servers that exist, or
the inventory. Let's say I want to do the inventory, okay, what all is there? What do they have? What parameter, what settings, the whole 9 yards.
So do you already know they exist and you can feed them in and then go get all the parameters back, or do you have to go find that they exist?
Let's say, okay, how about, I can give you the two scenarios. Yeah, I'll give you two scenarios. One is I know the IP address range or the subnet range in which their servers are. One is that. And second is I know the specific servers. So I think the second one should be hopefully more simpler. But what if there is a subnet range that, okay, let's say 192.1 or something, pick some good subnet range. So it's there and the SQL Server resides in those. So given those two scenarios, can it discover?
Take a look at find DBA instance.
Yes, it does have a find DBA instance.
I don't know if that covers all of your specific needs, RP, but that's at least a starting point. And then outside of this tool set, you might look at the map toolkit that Microsoft provides.
Yeah, map I'm familiar with, but I was just curious if, the CLI kind of sometimes one tends to feel a little bit more comfortable because GUI is doing so many things, so.
Well, the other thing you could do too is if you had a set IP addresses, you technically can use another PowerShell command that's in Windows that would test for the port and then file it in an array, and then you would have all your servers and then feed that into whatever DBA tool stuff that you needed. Because technically all you need to do is test for the port. The port is open.
Yeah, build your
for
own
every IP
port scanner. Yeah.
So you can just write your own port scanner for it, and then pull in computer names and then run it through anything else you want to run it through in DBA tools.
Okay.
So there's a test network connection, I think is what it would be, that test support. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. And that's just built into Windows. It's not in DBA tools, but there's a way to scan ports that way. And you can just loop through them and figure out which ones have the servers. You can just say successful or failed on the screen, and you know which ones have them, or output them to a CSV file or something, so you can pull them up later into Excel. There's all kinds of ways to do it. And you don't necessarily have to use DBA tools for it. So, okay,
thank you, Tracy.
Oh, no problem. Like I said, there's so much stuff you can do with PowerShell. It's just amazing. One thing we're going to change is our auto growth settings. They do not currently have a set DBA DB file command. It's on my to-do list to add to their list of things to do. So I've got this ugly query over here that I stole from the internet. That goes through all the databases and finds it if it's 1 meg or 10% basically. Then I wrote this pretty part down here that changes it. See, this part's pretty and this part's ugly. I didn't write this part. And then if it has any SQL, it'll actually execute it. So there's nothing there, it won't do anything. So we're just going to invoke that query so it can set us up where we're not growing by 1 meg or 10% on anything that's existing on the system. Because those are terrible things to do. Failed execution, huh? You did that to me last time. Why did you start doing that all of a sudden? We'll check to see that one. Because it actually disappeared off the report last time. Then we're going to set what trace flags we expect. So we always set the one up that gets the backups out of the logs, because that just takes up a tremendous amount of space. Then they have the temp DB ones kind of set kind of funky in here, I say, because you're telling it not to expect certain ones. And because 1117 is on by default in 2019, which is what I happen to be running, I'm going to say, yeah, I don't want 117 because by default it's going to check for 117. Probably need to clean it up a little bit. And then we're going to tell it to skip 118 because that's on by default in 2019 as well. So we got to tell it to skip one and not to expect one. It's just kind of confusing a little bit. Then we're going to actually enable our trace flag for 3226. We're going to try to set our max stop. I only got 2 CPUs, so it's going to set it incorrectly and still show up on the report. But it's there for completeness. There's one more thing I could have gotten off the report if I had more CPUs or to calculate with. I will let the report run, and I'm going to just tell you some other things that it can do for you. That way you know, and some settings that you may need to change in general as part of your default config. Because most of the stuff that I came up with is setting your power plans. These are still problems these days. You want to make sure they're on high performance and not clocking back your CPUs on you. You also, your cost threshold for parallelism is, defaulted to 5. So everything's going to run parallel these days. That's a SQL 7, I believe, in the basement on someone's PC settings from back when they created that setting, or 6.5, one of those two. So I always start with 25 and see how bad it gets. Then, like I said before, you can run all the Glen Allen Berry scripts, and there's a couple parameters in here where you could run it against a particular database. You can skip the server ones, or you can skip the database ones, and different things like that. And then they've got the export, so you can actually put it in someplace where you can do it. Anytime I take over, like I go take a new job or something, I run this on like every server and have like my inventory for the servers, because it outputs a CSV file that tells me the server settings for the server. And then of course I have a different file for every one, but at least I have everything I need. So we can open up our temp folder and see a whole bunch of stuff turning out. We'll see it turning out there as well. It's just going to spit out a lot of files, because I keep spitting out files every time I do a presentation. I spit out a new set of files. It overwrites some of them, but as you can see, it's just going through them all. And if it doesn't happen to have data for them, it skips them. Like query 19 didn't have anything. Query 21, 22, 23 didn't have anything. So it keeps you from having to run all those scripts by yourself and copy them into Excel. And these days, he's actually got Jupyter notebooks that you can run inside of Azure Data Studio instead of doing it this way. So you might want to explore those as well, depending on which method that you kind of need. So another thing I like, because I wrote this in T-SQL and did it the hard way and wrote a whole bunch of T-SQL, and I got it in Brent Ozar's newsletter, and then they wrote a 1-line command for it, and I'm jealous. Just Profit did this, is database compression of your indexes. So I wrote this really long, complicated way and put it on my blog, and yeah, and then they came out with this, and it's 1 line now. But you can compress all your indexes in a particular database. Say I'm going to save 25%, pick a percent, and it'll compress the index. By default, it does page compression, but you can tell it to do row compression instead. And then if you do the export CSV on the end, you can actually just have it save what it did to a file. So you'll know, hey, on this database, it compressed this index in this table to whatever. So I think that's kind of cool because, you know, then you don't have to figure out which indexes need compressed. After you get enough data in there, of course, you don't want to do it right away because it'll compress everything because there's nothing there. But if you got a heavy system that's never been compressed before, this is something that's, you know, good to run and see what's going on. I think there's a way to do a what if on there as well, where it won't actually do the compression. You can see ahead of time what it might do. So most of these commands do have a what if. So you can also do your patching here. So it can automatically go out and download the newest version of 2019 cumulative update, and it'll put it in my temp folder and download it straight off the internet and install it. I think that's just so cool. And then somebody was asking me about Kerberos authentication one time. So that's a link to try to get that fixed up. They do have like SPN tests in there and setting your SPNs and stuff. I know there's sometimes a problem with different things, and I've had problems over the years with it. So I know someone was asking me about that one time. So that's why there's a link in there for that. And then I did put a link in here on how you would just do like particular checks, like the CIS checks. This could also be agents, database, operator, any of those tags that you've seen before. And it would just run that one. And then you would have to change your data source in Power BI and refresh. So we've already, I think, ran this to get it down as low as we're going to get it. Yeah, see, it took care of the database, but I don't know why it says no. And see, I'm not on the active domain. I like having my database null turned on. I don't know about my fail-safe operator. Something grew on my system, so there's not much I can do about that. It's probably complaining about my instance connection, probably because I'm not on domain. Yeah, I'm not on Kerberos authentication because I'm not on domain and don't have a MT authenticated account. My max stop does not set right because I'm on 2 CPUs. So it's set, it wants it to be 0, but got 2 because I'm on 2 CPUs. It always sets it to 2. It's complaining about my last known run job because was less than 50. My max memory it's not complaining about. So it's only got these few things that's actually complaining about. So most of those I can't fix based on how I've got my environment set up. So I'm down to 12 failures from 121. With just those basic scripts that I set up and saved for you. So that's just the basics of how to go about using dbachecks and some of the commands for dbatools to, you know, start off with a clean install of SQL Server and bring it to like a standard configuration. So I will take more questions if there are any. These are the 2 main websites to go to. And they have, you know, they have the link to the book on dbatools website up in the top corner and the blogs and stuff. There's tons of people blogging about it, especially if they're the ones that wrote the commands. They're usually blogging about it, except me. I'm slack like that. Because I wrote some of the query store stuff too and some other stuff, and I never did blog about it. I was going to. I had good intentions. So if there's any more questions, I will take those and I'll put my content up here. And thank you for coming, and I hope you found it useful.
Any questions? And a reminder, you might be on mute. I don't have a question, but this was fantastic, Tracy. I'm not a DBA, but you know, I'm in some regards I should be doing more, or well, not should be, but need to be doing more, I guess. And so I've never played around with this, but I think I will be. So it was good. I appreciate it. Lots of good information.
Yeah, I thought this presentation was going to be horrible when I wrote it.
Oh, it's awesome.
Then I gave it the first time, and everybody's like, "That's a great presentation." I'm like, "Really?"
Yeah.
I still don't think it's a great presentation, but everybody says it is.
It's really neat seeing, you know, seeing the checks like go down, seeing like as you resolve them to, you know, watch the results on the Power BI dashboard. So that's really slick.
Oh, okay. I guess that might be what makes it pretty cool. I don't know. I was like, I'm going to do so many demos. They're going to be like, oh. But I try to explain it all as I go, and I got it big enough where if I can read it. So, and I stop for questions. So I think it, I think it's got a good flow to it. And it happened to fit exactly as an hour without me trying. It's
Love when that
brilliant.
happens. Exactly.
I didn't
So-
have to try too hard.
Tracy, just a quick question on the, there are so many different commandlets. So the question I have is, are there some commandlets which are better geared towards production environments? Are there like, okay, these ones are still kind of initial stage of testing or something, don't use on prod? Is there any categorization, published or unpublished?
No, they have pester tests that they actually run with the dbatools commands when they create a new function. They actually run a test to make sure that it does what they expect it to do. And then like the new agent operator one I wrote, they wrote a function to make sure it actually created the operator, and then they ran the get operator to make sure it returned what they expected that mine would create. And then I wrote a remove one so they could actually remove it so that it would clean itself up after the test. So they do have a testing structure behind the scenes to test for it. It doesn't mean there's not any bugs in it, because it's code, but it usually, it does. I've never heard of anybody having a production issue where it's like broke anything. It's usually, hey, the command just doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't do what I want. It just doesn't. It spits out an error. It doesn't do anything.
And okay, so
And-
maybe just
And
a little
that
bit
doesn't
now
happen
that
often.
so now that you mentioned that, so when let's say there were to be supposedly some error, would it be a verbose error or one of those silent ones that we are just like wondering what happened here?
No, you're gonna see, like I did with the SA account. You're gonna see a whole bunch of stuff. Let's go back to that. I think that was in miscellaneous where we try to rename the SA account right here. So let's just clear the host. So that's all you see. Because I've been meaning to file a bug report about this. This is why the one reason it's commented out, but I always try to run it, see if they've already fixed it. And I may not tell you exactly why it didn't work, but this is what it tried to do. It said failure, and it spit out some red stuff. And this is their messages right here, the yellow. So they're literally like, hey, I've got problems and telling you about it. So they rolled it back. And then they may have tried it again and got a null, and they rolled it back. So I don't know if they got like 3 retries in there or something to try it, but they rolled it back, and they spit out these objects that this is the whole object right here, and they tell you, hey, this is what happened. We failed to rename it. We rolled back the change, and they give you the error message and stuff. So you can actually take this stuff here that it gives you, and you can actually file a bug report with it on GitHub.
Oh, okay.
You can open up an issue with it and say, hey, I'm getting this, and they've got a clear instructions on, hey, what information they need you to file so that they can know how to troubleshoot it. Like, did you run it in PowerShell, or you running in VS Code, or you running in ISE? What version of PowerShell were you using? So forth and so forth.
Okay.
They've got a nice template for all that stuff for you to help you out with getting a bug report stuck in there.
And how good is this tool to, let's say, maybe you mentioned it already, maybe I'm just kind of wasn't paying attention, but let's say if I ask, okay, go create these bunch of databases, do certain activities, let's say if I were to categorize all of them as my one transaction, loosely speaking. And then I say, oh my God, I forgot that. Okay, wipe it clean, wipe the slate clean. Now does it give an option for me to like roll back everything which I just did?
It doesn't have a rollback. It doesn't really do it. Like if you told it to create 50 databases using the add database command, it doesn't know how to stop and roll that back. But it does have a remove database. So if you're using an array to send in, hey, create these 50 databases on this server, you can also send in that same array and tell it to remove those 50 databases into the remove command.
But how about this? What if does it give an option that, okay, here are, let's say, 10 or 5 commands, I want you to, I'm telling dbatool, okay, I want you to execute them, and then keep it in memory. The word memory, okay, whichever way, just know that, okay, this is my unique entity. It might have 10 items under it, 5 items, and then when I'm ready to pull the plug, okay, go to it. Is there a way like creating a batch file, in some semblance?
What you would do there, I think what you're trying to do there is like if you had 10 items, what you would want to do is store them in a text file or CSV and read them into the commands. That way it would remember what you were changing.
So can I create, like, can I tell dbtools, here is my master step, if I may use the word master steps, file. Okay, go iterate through them, create or run each of the commands. And then after all is done, whether success or failure, let's say, clean it up. That's doable?
No, you would have to write commands to clean it up.
Okay.
Yeah, you just need to write the PowerShell. It sounds like you just need to write the PowerShell script that kind of does the things that you're trying to do.
Let's see,
Check to make sure that they were done, and then it's just the logic within your PowerShell script is what it sounds.
Yeah, because they've got everything that you would like if you add a database, they've got a remove database. So you would check to see the output, whether it was successful or not. And then if you just decide later on you don't need them, like you would pass in an array that says a variable of some sort that says, hey, I want to create these databases. And then you change your mind, you pass in that same variable to the remove and get rid of it. So if you think you're going to be outside of the window, like you're going to close PowerShell by accident, you just put those in a text file or something, or a CSV file, or have them in a table in SQL and query them out, whichever way you can store them permanently, so that you can move them between screens and stuff, just in case computer shuts down or whatever. Make it rerunnable that way, or hard code them in. I don't like hard coding, but you put them somewhere where you can get to them again. Okay. And you just write the code around it.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? If not, thank you again, Tracy. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Tracy, so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
No problem. Anytime. I like presenting. It's fun.
Much appreciated.
We heard that, and it's on the recording, so we will definitely hit you up again.
Well, the only other talk I'm giving right now is my mental health talk. So I'm going to have something new probably in the fall, but those are only 2 I'm currently doing.
Yeah, fair enough. Sounds good. Well, thank you again, Tracy. Thank you, everybody that attended. And I guess we'll call it a meeting. Have a great evening, and we'll get this video posted to YouTube probably tomorrow. So
awesome.
All right. Well,
Thanks,
thank everybody for coming. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye.